So imagine that while you're sitting at home on a quiet evening.
Steve the Amateur Historian.
What I'm talking about is the Portland boom of 2010. Talk about fodder for conspiracy theories run rampant. I don't really know what to believe. I don't want to go so far as to side entirely with the wild theories about what this might have been, but the official story doesn't fully work for me either. So what is the Portland boom? Well, according to my information, at approximately 8:05 p.m., March 28th, 2010, there was a massive boom heard primarily all over southeast Portland. A big, rapturous, reverberating boom that was heard as far away as Gresham. It was heard as far north as, I want to say, St. John's. Like, this was something that was so powerful that 10, 12, 15 miles away, people could hear it. And immediately there was panic, there was calls going in, people trying to figure out what the hell was that. Some people thought perhaps it was lightning that was just a little bit too close. But how do you have one strike of lightning that's too close to several different neighborhoods all at once? It really threw people, really panicked them, and it was a mystery for a while. It really was. And it's very interesting. A couple of guys actually put together a Google map sort of document, and it was made for people to mark essentially where they were and how loud the sound was. So there'd be these markers all over Portland. And, you know, based on what color you gave, that was how intense the loudness was. Now, that being said, this sort of, you know, online scientific method trying to figure out where the boom came from is subject to people's opinion. There could have been some people that heard it louder than they thought, but said it was softer. There could have been people that heard something that was kind of loud, but immediately were like, well, it was crazy, so it had to be loud. So you got people that are saying it's loud when it's kind of loud, and people where it was maybe louder than they wanted to say. But in essence, it became pretty clear pretty fast that there was a large collection of red marks. Red was like, it was really loud. And they were focused in the Sellwood neighborhood in southeast Portland, right along the Willamette River. So that information was used and the general area was searched. Now, in addition to these multiple reports coming out of Sellwood saying there was an intense explosion very close to them, or intense boom, some kind of thing, there were at least 2 or 3 people, there may have been more, I don't know, I've only seen these couple, who actually said that in addition to hearing the boom, and these were people that lived down along the Willamette River, that they saw a flash of some kind. So they accorded that flash with the sound they heard as corroborating with each other. And this ultimately directed the police's attention to a place called Powers Marine Park, which was just a park. It was just more kind of a long stretch of beach that somewhat inhabited. It's a little inconvenient to get to, so there's usually not too many people down there, even though it's technically a park. And it's right across the river from Sellwood. So it kind of made sense to focus in on that area. And ultimately, the remains of what were determined to be a pipe bomb were found in that marine park. And immediately that was deemed so the problem was solved. Someone had built a pipe bomb. Why they took it down to a marine park where nobody was, where not a lot of people would really see it and would set it off there, is anyone's guess. But that was the resolution, was that boom that reverberated all through southeast Portland predominantly was from a pipe bomb just across the river from Sellwood, so kind of the bottom fringe of southwest Portland, right along the Willamette River. And now this is the resolution reached. According to authorities, there were remains of a pipe bomb found that correlate fairly well with where at least, a couple people in Sellwood say they saw kind of a flash when this boom occurred. So there's reason to believe this resolution, but a lot of people are very skeptical about it. I've seen people who actually have experience with explosives going on to forums and things like that and saying this was not a pipe bomb. If this is a pipe bomb, I would not have heard it as loudly as I did where I was, and I was way over here, and Powers Marine Park's way over here. So this immediately has become, ripe for all kinds of conspiracy beliefs. And again, I don't really know exactly which way to go personally, which is why I kind of want to talk about it. I kind of want to just give you guys all of the information and then let you kind of play around with it and maybe do your own research. Because again, for instance, there was a large concentration of reports from the Sellwood area saying that the boom was really, really intense. There was more of those markers in Sellwood than anywhere else. But at the same time, you have people saying it was an incredibly intense explosion all the way in Happy Valley, which is miles east from Sellwood. It's not even in the same county. And then, again, you go north. I mean, people in Vancouver heard this boom, and some people way up North Portland said they heard it intensely. So either there was more than one boom going on in several different places to make for people all over Portland in at least a certain pockets come out and say this was a really loud, intense explosion. What I heard, if I'm in northeast Portland, how intensely I heard it, there's no way it was coming from the fringe of southwest Portland. And what's super interesting is the majority of people who replied to the Google document and replied on how loud they heard it. It was predominantly concentrated in southeast Portland. There was barely anybody in southwest Portland that acknowledged hearing it. And there was actually some people that were near Powers Marine Park who said they heard the boom, but it wasn't that intense. And I'm like, how is the crux of this sound in southwest Portland on the border pretty much with where it hits Lake Oswego? Why is it that people in southwest Portland, barely anybody goes on there and mentions hearing about the explosion, and yet that's where it came from, and yet southeast Portland, even several miles away, there's people all over the place saying, we heard this boom, we all heard this boom. And yet the very vicinity of Powers Marine Park, there was barely any responses from people. And there's lots of homes in that area, not right down on the river, but right up the hill. It really doesn't make sense if you look at the data. You can look at all the red marks in Sellwood and say that shows the genesis of the sound. But where they say it came from doesn't fit with the rest of the data as a whole. So it's very peculiar. And what further complicates matters, and has kind of driven people to wonder if something else was going on, something that authorities didn't want people to know was going on, or something they wanted to cover up, conceal for whatever reason, is it's known that March 29th, the day after this big boom was heard, and there was focus put again towards Powers Marine Park, and authorities searched all over that area. Various different factions, the police, firefighters, they searched this area with a fine-tooth comb and found nothing. They were ready to start looking in other places to try to figure out what happened. And then what's very interesting is after these authorities search this area, very detailed, find nothing, for some reason, I want to say the mayor of Portland actually sent in an explosives team, like explosives experts, to look for explosives, even though, like, again, a lot of people thought this was maybe thunder, it was like a supersonic boom. They couldn't know for certain that what they were looking for in that area was necessarily an explosive of some kind. And if it was, why are you sending random officers in there? Why wouldn't you send the explosive experts in there in the first place? But instead, after nothing's found, and theoretically you would have no more reason to search that area unless some piece of evidence came out redirecting you in that way, suddenly, after that police search, explosives experts are sent in, and boom, they suddenly find the remains of a pipe bomb. So that's very strange. It seems what they found was, beaten up and deteriorated from the explosion, but large enough pieces, obvious enough that anybody doing a general search of the area should have seen this stuff pretty easily. And these explosive experts found it pretty easily. So that's opened up discussion to ideas like, is the immediate aftermath of this boom, either the authorities want to cover up what it really was, or they don't know what it is and people around the city are concerned and they're worried and they want an answer, and the authorities want to calm the general populace and therefore conceive of this artificial pipe bomb story to calm everybody down, and whatever it really is, we'll figure it out later, or maybe we already know what it is and don't want the public to know. And that can explain why this area is searched the day after these explosions are heard, or this boom is heard. Nothing's found, and then suddenly a little bit more down the road, suddenly stuff is found there, the remains of an exploded pipe bomb. So that's opened up the doors to a lot of people to kind of question, what was this really? And there are even reports into the early morning hours of March 29th. There was a report on a message board that around 4:55 in the morning, another one of these loud booms was heard. Well, what caused that? Was the sound the same in all the various different areas, meaning the booms both came from the same spot? Were there two pipe bombs recovered? One went off a little after 8 p.m. on the 28th, and then a little bit before 5 a.m. on the 29th, another one went off. Did they find the remains of two pipe bombs? Because they say they only found the remains of one. Like, what's happening here? And these weren't the only, quote, booms that were ever heard. I want to say there was a boom heard not too long before this March 28th one. Not quite as intense. But then there was another boom that happened in Beaverton on April 8th, 2010. So approximately 11 days later. This boom in particular occurred a little after 9 p.m., was quite a bit softer than the one that was supposedly heard presumably in the vicinity of Sellwood, Willamette River area. And conspiracy theorists have argued that this is or was intended to be a distraction, a way of saying like, hey, these boom things just kind of happen. There's no rhyme or reason to it, or to kind of make people forget about the first one by having this slightly smaller one happen, and then the attention is focused on that. Who's really to say? But it's very interesting, and it really does open the door to some crazy conspiracy theories that, again, I don't necessarily support in any way, but I do find the official story just a little too perfect, and there's just a few too many witnesses who are like, I've been around explosives before. From how far away I was or live or am from Powers Marine Park, there's no way that this was a pipe bomb. Now, it has been suggested that because the bomb was on a beach near the Willamette River, that the ripples of water on the river actually helped to reverberate the sound. I don't know the science behind that. I've heard that case argued, and that could explain why it had such a rippling effect, if you pardon the pun, of sound all through southeast Portland. But again, that doesn't explain why There were places miles away where people were reporting to hear the boom as intensely as people in Sellwood. It doesn't explain why the boom happened on the shoreline in southwest Portland and yet barely anybody in southwest Portland reported hearing it if it's supposed to be such a massive boom rippling across the river. You know, it doesn't explain why so many people further north heard this sound and heard it intensely. It's definitely, it leaves room for discussion, and I'm not a, physics major, I'm not a explosives expert, so a lot of these possibilities that have been brought up, I can only hypothesize on as barely a novice in certain cases, but it's definitely a very bizarre and troubling case, and there's been lots of random suggestions about what this boom or these booms could possibly be. Again, whether it was lightning of some kind, which I don't even think there was lightning that evening, so that got cast aside pretty quick. Was it some kind of super boom? I know one source suggested that there was a kind of an anarchist type group in Portland that was planning on doing a major protest. I want to say March 29th, the day after the boom, and people have wondered if maybe that was in relation to them, or if maybe that event happened as a way to distract away from the things that they were planning to do the next day, because one thing a city government doesn't like is when anarchists are walking around making a bunch of noise. So to this day, all we have is the official story that some guy set off a pipe bomb, and from there on out, there's merely theories that we can come up with. It's going to be, I don't think there's any recordings of the boom. All we really have is what people heard, so I don't really think there's anything to actually test to see if we could narrow down what it is and if it's not a pipe bomb or whatever. So I feel like it's something that's just going to linger forever, as just a not fully settled incident, an incident where the official conclusions are one that we're not comfortable with. But then again, how often is that the case, So anyway, I thought that was a really interesting story to talk about, something that I don't remember happening. I mean, granted, I lived several miles south of the Portland border. Had I heard it way down in Gladstone, Oregon City neighborhood, which is, 7-8 miles south of Sellwood, Powers Marine Park, it may have been nothing more than a little sound to me. And if I'm, got my headphones on or I got the TV turned up, what have you, I'm probably not going to hear it. So it was an incident that I was surprised to stumble onto, but one that definitely keeps the mind wondering, what really was the Portland boom? And that's the story. So guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Hopefully it was a little piece of intrigue. If you've lived in the Portland area a while, hopefully that's sparked your interest at least a little bit. And if not, hey, it's a story that you probably haven't heard before that's got your mind pondering. So anyway, guys, till next time, you know the shtick. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and hit up my Patreon. Links in the description below. If you want to help me out financially, I would appreciate it beyond all means. And all that said, till next time, guys, this is Steve the Amateur Historian, and I will see you next time.